So good to see you, Gina.
Morning. Good to see you, Luke. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Very good. So today's on elevating our leadership with empathic listening. And so I would love to ask you just straight away, what is empathy or why is empathy important in the workplace?
Sure. So, empathy really is um, the act of understanding the message and as well as the feeling behind it. So, it's kind of feeling along with a person as opposed to feeling sympathy where you're feeling for the person. So,
Mhm.
empathy and communication is when we listen actively to understand their thoughts and the meaning and the feeling behind it. So
Mm.
it is important in the workplace because it helps us build that connection with others that we're working with our teams, with our leaders, with our um, the people we're working with, our clients. So not only within the organization, but also our customers, our colleagues that we're working with outside the organization. So, if we can build trust, if we can build that connection, then we can move on to do other things like, solve problems or, come up with new ideas, exchange ideas. So,
Mm.
that's why it's important. And it's also one of those behaviors that allows us to satisfy that connection well-being requirement. So we know that psychological well-being relies on connections with others. So empathy is a way for us to that, to develop that.
Yeah. Yeah, because communicating with just words alone is it's only half the picture, isn't it? So
Mhm.
to really connect with someone, we need to actually have that care, empathetic care. What are some of the mindsets that you see in people that hold them back from being good empathetic listeners? Because
Mm.
what I have seen in my experience is the mentality of, "Oh, I kind of know it all already," or that's kind of, I don't have time to listen. It's just give me the just give me the words or whatever you're saying, and it's just they're just quick, and they look. I think they look past the benefit of slowing down and actually listening properly, listening with their body.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of barriers to empathic listening. I feel that one of the most common ones is, like you say, not giving them the full presence, not fully being able to devote attention to listening fully. Um,
Mm,
or when someone is trying to convey a feeling, maybe their words aren't really coming across, and if you're not really listening to understand the feelings behind it, you may not be getting the full message. So that would mean you're hearing the words, but maybe the person isn't really expressing themselves very clearly. And if you're not listening
mhm,
empathically, you're not eliciting more of that information from them and
mm,
getting the feeling behind it, which is part of understanding it. Not only the cognitive words that are being said, not only that content, but also the sentiment behind it. That's the key piece for empathy. So if we're rushed or if we're really don't want to hear it, that's probably not the time to have the conversation. Maybe we, reschedule or try to get to a point where we can give them that full attention that would be necessary to really promote that understanding. And that's really what the goal is to
mm,
understand, right? So any barriers, distractions, not being fully present, not really caring. I mean, that is a problem. If
yeah,
a leader doesn't care to hear from others, then maybe that's not the right role for them, right? There's a lot of very competent people who are in a leadership position, but maybe they don't have some of these skills. And so that's one reason we're talking about it today. It's really important to develop. It's a skill. It's not like you are an empathic listener or you're not. These are behaviors, so we can develop them. But we have to first remove those barriers. Like you said, we have to really work at it and practice really. There's things
Mm,
we can do to learn these and to execute them.
yeah. Yeah. So before we get into some of them skills and how to develop the skills, I would love to get your point of view on the benefits and the meta benefits of developing these empathy skills,
Mhm.
because I know it's an important part of emotional intelligence. And according to Daniel Goleman's work, which I know you've done a lot of research on, is that's one of the most, if we're trying to get promotions and develop in our career, it's emotional intelligence is one of the key parts of that, right?
Yes.
So what are some compelling reasons that would make someone want to really develop their empathy skills?
Sure. Well, for leaders, one of the biggest problems in the workplace is keeping roles filled, right? Retaining good people. We want to keep our best people. And one way we can do that is to build that connection with those folks, through empathy. When we have to fill a position or someone leaves, you have months of, the position is empty, then you have to recruit, you have to interview, you train the new person on it, onboarding them, they have to get up to speed, so it's literally months of lost productivity, right? So the
Mm,
costs alone of poor retention is something we need to pay attention to. That's a very, very tangible, practical issue aside from the personal issue, right? So um, we also know that people are more likely to experience higher job satisfaction and stay in their jobs if they have a really good manager or a really good boss, right? So their immediate supervisor is perhaps one of the most predictive factors in whether someone stays in their job. So
mm,
why not develop other skills that enable us to retain that connection and to develop a connection with the people that we're leading?
mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, coming from a just in my coaching experience, one of the things I learned, which also applies to leadership, is that it's actually a presupposition from NLP they teach, which is uh, when you have a resistance from a client and from the leader's perspective. So when you have resistance from one of your colleagues, it indicates a lack of rapport.
Mm.
And so learning how to listen empathetically and build that connection can also reduce resistance in your team and allow your team to run more smoothly. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. That resistance, it doesn't foster moving forward, right? And that's
Mm,
what we want to do, particularly in the workplace, move forward with a solution or an
mm,
idea. And I do think that that's a very good indicator. If you're getting that resistance, it's not an open conversation, right? It's not, if someone was free to voice their concerns or their questions and felt like they would be heard, then
mm.
they would not be showing that resistance. So I definitely agree with
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's such it's a key piece in the success of a team, isn't it?
that.
Okay. So what makes a great listener, Gina? How-
So, it's a behavior, right? So it's not like we are a good listener or we're not a good listener. The behaviors involved in empathic listening have to do with participating and expending energy, right? So if we're just hearing a message, we're spending very little energy, and if we're spending any, it's usually because we're directing that energy inward and we're just trying to figure out what we're going to say in response to what someone has said to us. So that's not empathic listening. So the empathic listening behaviors would involve asking questions, making sure we understand the message by clarifying, ask the speaker to clarify and say, what, can you help me understand, or can you explain that further, or tell me more about that. So you're eliciting more information and sentiment and the feeling behind it. So Yeah, these are things we can do. Ask the questions. We can nod and encourage
Mm,
as the person is speaking. You can, acknowledge what they're saying with an uh-huh or yes, that kind of thing. Shaking your head, that sort of thing. But in being involved, and of course, our body language can influence how well we're listening. It can also send messages back to the speaker that we're open and we're engaged, if we're maintaining eye contact, if
mhm,
we're have an open posture, not we're not sitting there with our arms crossed or our jaw set or looking away, that kind of thing.
mm,
We can practice some of these behaviors mirroring back to what the person says so that it's reflected and they can decide, oh, I didn't really mean that, and so they further clarify. They might say, oh, did I say that? Well, I didn't really mean that, and here's what I meant. So it enables them to hone their message,
mm,
simply because we've asked for clarification or we've restated it back to them in a way that they get to examine their words and maybe decide that's not exactly what they wanted to say. And along those lines, it's really important that we use their words, not our words. We don't want to infer a sentiment. We don't want to say, "Oh, you said you were angry about X," when the person said, "I was disappointed." Right. So that's a difference in intensity that's significant. So we
yeah.
don't want to inject our own interpretation of what they said. We
Mhm,
want to really mirror back what they've said and
mm,
match that level of intensity, right? We don't want to read anything into it because that would be attributing, something that they didn't really convey. Um,
mhm,
so these are some of the behaviors involved in active listening or empathic listening.
mhm. Yeah, nice. Yeah. There's another thing that I guess is a presupposition again, that comes from, I believe, that same field, and it's that you cannot not communicate. And so if I'm listening to you, like, yeah, I'm listening, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I'm communicating that. Yeah, it's like unless communicating something.
Yeah.
And it's not really probably what I want to be communicating to the other person through my so you actually communicate to the other person through your listening style, don't you?
Absolutely. Your body is giving a message, whether you intend it to or not. And that's why I talk about this a lot in Skills That Build, that we want to match what our body is doing with the message we want to give. So even as a listener, we're giving a message with our body. So our body language needs to convey, yeah, we're open to what you have to say. We are paying attention. We value what you're talking about. Um, and so, yeah, we have to be aware of that, not only our ears in listening. It's a whole brain issue, using not only our ears but our eyes, our body, our brain to kind of dish the preconceived notions or the biases that we have, leave those at the door, go in preparing to have an open conversation with no judgment, because that's really important for empathy, is to not judge, to understand. You don't have to feel the same way or agree, but you can restate what the other person has said and why they feel that way.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So how would you say a person can, or a leader can suspend judgment, especially when they're listening to something they really don't agree with or don't want to hear?
Hmm.
They probably want to jump in and say, no, you're wrong. What are you talking about? Or they want to, even suspending judgment in their own mind will come across in their body language. So how can a person do that when, and listen empathetically when they have a strong judgment or disagree, would you
Hmm.
say?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the most challenging parts of listening with empathy, and that is to just take in the message without the emotional reaction. And so this takes a bit of practice. It may involve, really uh, just concentrating on the other person, what they're saying. I tell people to imagine a cocoon, that they're in a cocoon with just the speaker and themselves. And so they've shut out the rest of the world, any distractions and any biases that they might have be bringing along to this conversation. So
Mm,
trying to distance ourselves, remaining open, and that means open body posture. Not sitting there with your arms crossed and your jaw set, and kind of a stoic face. We really want to show expression, um, but not react in a way that will shut down the speaker. Right? We want to elicit more information to get the understanding, and and it does take some skills on the part of the listener. One of those is using the pause, right? So if someone is giving you a message that you don't agree with, what you can do is you take time after they're finished speaking to pause and maybe say, well, let me take a minute to think about what you said. And in that time frame, a few seconds, you can tone down the intensity, first of all, regulate your own emotion, and then maybe take some deep breaths and gather your thoughts so that you can respond in a way that isn't going to shut it down and maybe elicit more information from the other. But it isn't easy. It does take practice, um, and even knowing how to do it. We don't all do it all the time. It's again that whole idea of executing what you know. We talked about that in the last episode, but it does take practice. So pausing, digest the information, trying not to be reactive. We have that vigilance that goes along with our negativity bias, where we're looking out for threats, right? And so if someone
mm,
starts talking about something that we don't agree with, we start our alerts go up, and we want to try to suppress that in such a way that we can take in the message and not let that be a barrier.
mm, yeah. So yeah, this is why I think one of the key skills for a leader is developing incredible emotional control over themselves.
Mhm.
Because we can't truly lead a team until we can truly lead ourselves, right?
Exactly.
And that comes across in our communication and everything beyond. So yeah, so how would you say a leader can balance this empathy
Mhm.
and maintain connection while also holding one of their team members accountable, and
Right.
especially when performance needs to change?
Hmm. So, part of a conversation and part of empathic listening is participating, right? You're actively engaged. So, what a leader can do is openly discuss, um, some of the issues associated with either the problem that the person is bringing to them, or you know their understanding of the problem and how it might impact others in the workplace. So they might be talking about alternative solutions they might bring forward, or they might try to recognize the barriers. Okay, what's preventing you from doing your job, or what's impacting your performance that I'm not aware of, or maybe you need additional resources. So they can try to draw that out in a bit of a problem solving um, effort. And we see this more in the workplace than elsewhere. But empathic listening doesn't always mean you have to solve the problem. But in the workplace, it generally does require
Mhm.
some sort of problem solving, right?
Yeah.
Because that's why we're working, right? We're coming up with a new idea. We're solving a problem. We're creating something. So um, while generally in among two people, you don't necessarily want to go in and try to fix whatever the problem is of someone sharing with you. In a workplace, you might have to do some fixing, but I don't think it's incompatible, right? The idea of being empathic and also um, going for the best performance, right? So your company has goals, your organization has goals, the employee is there for that purpose, right? And so I think the more you understand where they're coming from, the better you can work together collaboratively to bring it all together so that they can help the company achieve their goals and, meet the deadline or make the sale or whatever it is, but meet the performance standards. So I don't think it's incompatible. And I think we know it's intrinsically motivating. If someone feels a connection, they are more likely to be internally motivated towards better performance than
Mm,
if they're not connected. So empathy goes a long way towards that connection. So the more empathetic you can be, the more connected you'll feel, and this will result in the employee motivating themselves as opposed to you having to dangle a carrot as a leader, and incentivize that performance.
yeah. Yeah, it makes me think about some of the leaders I've met out there that really have uh, like the old school style of
Mhm,
leadership where they instead of it's not about connecting um, connecting in order to influence
mhm,
because someone is the ability to influence someone is it's so much easier to influence through a genuine connection and um, getting them on the same team and seeking to understand, it's so much easier to influence them. Well, it's easier in the sense that they will gladly do what you say to do, and it'll be a much more cohesive unit.
mhm.
But it does take a bit more effort than the managers who are just like, I told you to do that because I'm the boss. It's like leading from out of fear, like boss. It's kind of bossing versus leadershiping.
Exactly. And I think it's an important distinction because there's one thing to managing the work, managing the project,
Mhm.
managing the company, and leading. So we can have people who are leaders who are not even in a managerial role, let's say. So I
Mhm.
think it's important that we have that distinction, that we want to lead, right? We want to be leaders, whether we're in that recognized role or not. Yeah, so it's important that we recognize the difference between leading and managing, right? And
Mm.
that one way communication is not empathic listening, because if you're just giving directives or mandates, this is what I need you to do without any kind of engagement from the person you're speaking with, that's not empathic listening. That's one way communication, is not bi-directional, which empathy requires that two-way thing. I think of it as dancing with a partner, right? So when you're listening empathically, you're moving together, you're going
Mhm.
with the person. Whereas if you are um, just relaying information or telling them what to do, that's one way. That's not really, it's one way, one direction, it's linear, as opposed to together, almost a circular thing where you're together as a dyad, let's say, and that cocoon idea where you're just the two of you working together.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so like if someone is out there that's listening, that's like, this stuff, I was thinking I should learn it, but it just seems too slow. I can just get to straight to the point and tell them what to do. And it's like we're here to get a job done. What would
Yeah,
what would you say to them?
I would say it takes energy. Clearly it's work, right? And some people don't want to put in that extra effort, but it really requires you to work at it. And I think it's a kind of a turning point when someone realizes, yeah, I need to invest time into my people, or into our group, into my work, in order to really elicit the best performance that I can. And so if you're not willing to do that, then your work is going to suffer, or your productivity, your performance will suffer, your team's performance will suffer.
Yeah.
So it's when a leader recognizes that, I think that's when we start to see the beginning of change, because now they're aware, oh gosh, this is harder than I thought, maybe, and this is going to require me to learn something and practice and get better at.
Mm.
And there needs to be some commitment towards doing so in order to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it's like what I would say to that leader is that they're just thinking too short term.
Right.
Yeah, because if you think if you're thinking long term, and you look at any incredible team, and I think the Army and the Navy, like Navy SEALs and things like that, is just an example of an incredibly cohesive team that is built over who knows how. I don't know how long that kind of training is, but they're trained to just be there for each other and for a purpose that is bigger than themselves,
Hmm.
and they would sacrifice themselves for each other. And imagine having even some level of that in your team at work,
Hmm.
where you're there for a cause that's bigger than just I'm just here to make a check. Like, you're
Right.
there because like I want to help you succeed, you succeed, you succeed, and I'm willing to like I'm here with you as a loyal part of this team, and I feel proud to be on this team, and we're fighting for whatever cause it is, whatever it is your company does. And I think also that the great leader can inspire that into their team to get them to feel like, yeah, we're a part of this and it's meaningful and we can, yeah, we're let's do it. And everyone feels like an important part of the team. And long term, that is going to make such a difference to the team success, right? Versus just like, yeah, just get it done. Or yeah, just if you're not happy with it, then we'll just get someone like another,
Mhm.
just get another cog in the machine. We don't care about you. Kind of, there's so many workplaces that still operate from that
It's
culture, right?
it is true. I think what you said about, you know, we're all in this together, or like the Navy SEALs, for example, that level of trust. I mean,
Mm,
what a model that is for other teams and other organizations to just develop that trust among their people. I think, that's the beginnings of psychological safety, which is a whole nother topic. But essentially, when you have that level of trust and you feel validated, you feel seen and heard, and that you have that safety where you can express yourself and someone's hearing it, your leader's hearing it. Not only is it good for you and the leader, but the leader is now modeling that behavior for other people in the team. So now it becomes a value within the organization and it can be incorporated into the culture of the organization. So it's one thing to say, oh, we want to be a cohesive team, we all want to work together. But if you're actually doing it and someone sees you doing that, and the way you listen to someone else when they raise a question or when they raise an issue or an objection, even the way you interact with them models a behavior that sets the tone for your culture within your organization. And if you really believe in the power of empathy to develop your team, other people will see that and they might be inspired as well to demonstrate those same behaviors. So that's another reason a team can be transformed when the leader shows empathy, because everybody sees it, right? And it becomes very powerful. And the leader may, ask people if they want to go to training or help them develop in those areas, give feedback. But that's how we can work towards, the whole Navy SEAL level of trust, which is a super model to go after.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's built within into the culture, and then especially if you care about the longevity of the company and the clients or customers of the company, then having that starting at the top of the company and within the culture is going to come out into the customers and the clients, and
Hmm.
just makes such a big difference. So, so I think we have a decent understanding of like how body language can help us be more empathic, because you mentioned that earlier about just through listening, through uh, how we use our body language when we're listening. If someone's talking about something sad, we wouldn't be like, "Yeah, okay, tell me more." Like,
Right.
we want to match whatever the tone of whatever's coming out for them.
Mhm.
Um, showing interest in the speaker is, I think you've mentioned that, just through ums and ahs and nodding and just active listening.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious how you mention in the book about how our brain is involved in empathic listening, and I'm curious about how is that involved?
So our brain takes cues not only from our external environment, but also from our own behaviors. So
Mm,
when we are actively listening, we are giving messages to our brain as well. So if we are engaged, if we are showing interest, if we are asking questions, if we're maintaining that eye contact, we're telling our brain we're interested, right? So we're influencing our own attitudes by our behaviors. And many people think it's the other way around. Behavior or attitudes drive your behavior, and that is true. But behaviors also drive your own attitudes. So
yeah.
by behaving in this way, we're telling our brains, yeah, we're interested, we're engaged listeners, and
Mm,
the other person sees that as well. So it's not only influencing our perceptions of ourselves, it's influencing the perceptions others have of us. So that's one way our brain can be involved. But also, all of the uh, biases that we have, we bring to the conversation. So our brains have these shortcuts, if you will, where, oh, we know historically we've had this person in our office and there's always a problem. And, if we go into it thinking it's just going to be another one of those conversations,
here we
we're
go.
setting
Here we
ourselves
go.
up to fail, right? We're setting that conversation up to be less than um, less than understanding because we've already kind of painted a picture, we've put it in a framework before the first word is even said. So that's something we need to work towards, knowing our biases and mitigating those, kind of checking them at the door so that we don't bring that along. But that takes active thought among the listeners. So that might mean if you have a conversation like that coming up and you're not ready, you haven't had a chance to really think it through and come at it with this approach, maybe you suggest, can we do this, you know in a half hour, or whatever
Mm,
time you need, ask for time to get yourself to that place. And that again goes back to the idea of your full presence. But if we use those tools available to us, we don't have to react, oh, they just came into our office, we have to have the conversation now. No, you really don't. You can say, okay, I want to talk about this, let's do it, and you set a time. So
mm,
I think that's the biases. We have to work at them, we have to be aware, we have to learn what our biases are and learn to mitigate them. So there's another way our brain is involved. So, and it's really it's that whole mind body connection where what we do influences our hormonal levels. So we have things like, our cortisol level, the stress hormone, that might go up if we have, a stressful conversation, or we're going to be talking to somebody who in the past, we've had not such a great interaction with. So we can mitigate those. We can do that through, empowering postures. You stand up maybe so that we feel more confident. We could, um, you know, take in some more oxygen by positioning ourselves in an open position with, with our arms away from the body, allowing ourselves to be in the best position to interact with this other person. So yeah, our brain is so involved, and this is where it becomes not just our ears and listening, it's the whole person. It's a holistic way of interacting with someone.
mm. So much of what you said, I've shared today, especially around how to get good at this skill, it requires a lot of self-awareness,
Hmm.
and a lot of self-reflection.
Hmm.
Um, so we've got, would you say, like, reflecting on, for example, what you just shared, like, how am I actually feeling? I've got this meeting in 10 minutes. how I'm actually feeling about that. What are my current biases? I'm actually, I'm not feeling too good about it. I'm actually a bit pessimistic about this, and I'm a bit stressed, and I'm lacking time already, and so it takes that self reflection to then go, you know what, I'm going to just move the meeting so it can be more productive.
Mhm,
So where does this, well, I guess getting into how I can really develop this skill.
mhm,
You mentioned biases. So what if someone doesn't know their biases? What if someone doesn't have quite a they're kind of new to this and they're like, all right, I want to develop this. How can I be more self reflective, and how can I start to train this in myself? Or maybe, of course, a coach is really great at reflecting your biases back to you and that kind of thing, so that they can hire a coach. But if
mhm.
on their own, what are some ways they can do that, become more self-reflexive, and actually reflective, and develop this skill of becoming a better empathetic listener?
I think the best way to do it is through role play, and it
Okay.
doesn't require a partner. It doesn't require that you have a coach that you can role play with. We have tools now, technology. We can record ourselves on the phone. We can reflect on a conversation that we've had, and kind of tease through it and actually examine it for, how did we react when this was said, or how were we sitting? It's hard to recall if you haven't been filmed, but we can film ourselves,
Mm,
and maybe we do it with, kind of a made up conversation, but just to start honing in on our feelings and our behaviors, how we're sitting, what we're doing with our hands, with our facial expressions, that kind of thing. And we can mirror ourselves, right? So we can look in the mirror, first of all, we can record ourselves, we can get a partner who's willing to help us, a
mm,
family member or a friend, even a colleague can help with this role playing idea so that you can start to observe your own behaviors. Because when we observe ourselves, we get a lot of information from that, and it's very helpful, and we can't act on a behavior until we know what it is, right? So
mhm,
that's one way. The biases are a little less tangible. You can't observe them as well, but the byproduct of those biases might be you tense up before a conversation, or you don't take the call, or
mm,
I, I see this a lot with leaders. They anticipate an issue coming from an employee, and they get the phone call and they're holding the phone out, you know, away from their body, and like physically distancing themselves from the other person. And so, like,
mm,
this is so telling. And so, what I would say to that is, stand up, take the call, like stand up so you're better physically prepared to,
mm,
manage that. If you're expecting an affront of some sort, maybe the person comes at it very harshly, or, you're expecting them to vent, that kind of thing. Be ready to absorb that. And that requires a little bit of effort. So I always suggest in those kinds of phone calls, stand up. You're in a better position than if you're seated, right? you're
mhm,
you're empowering yourself, because
mhm,
again, we want to be um respecting not only the speaker but ourselves as a listener, right? So we want to be prepared to fully take in the message, and not disrespect our own boundaries, let's say.
mhm. Okay. Okay, nice, nice. Yeah, so that's a simple practice that someone can do, is be aware of their body language. So if they're sitting there and taking calls like this, they might want to get up and just at least, yeah, bring their posture up. One thing I know that helped me when I was younger, to develop these skills, is just being conscious of it throughout the day whenever I had a conversation, even if it
Mhm.
was with the cash teller at the or cash register person. Just like, how's your day been, and listen to them, and just like have a little practice session.
Mhm.
And those repetitions build up over time. Um, and it really, yeah, really develops quickly. And so I guess like the last question for you is, what are some of you've mentioned some of them already, but what are some more simple daily micro practices that the listeners can use to really strengthen this empathetic listening?
Yeah, I think there's things we can do. First of all, the awareness, so practicing with these low risk conversations, like you mentioned, I think that's a really great way that everyone can improve their communication as a listener,
Mm,
engaging someone in a conversation. And
mm,
if it is with the coffee shop clerk or whoever, you're still practicing those same skills, but there's less at stake, let's say. So that's one way. But one thing I would say is to look for patterns in our responses. So if we can observe a pattern, then we can decide: do we want to continue with that behavior, or do we want to generate something more desirable? Another way of doing that, an alternative that's more would better show that empathy. So identifying them and deciding what might be a better alternative, and then working towards enacting that alternative behavior. So
what's
this
an
will go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to just say, what's an example of a pattern someone might see in their communication?
So one example might be when someone immediately responds, right?
So
It's almost
noticing.
like a tennis match. A person speaks and then the listener responds. So immediate that there's not even any reflection. It's
Mhm,
because they're formulating a response while the other person is speaking. And we're doing that. We're missing some of the message. When we're
mhm,
formulating our response, we might miss words that are being said. We might miss facial expressions from the listener. We might miss their body language. So we're missing cues that would enable us to take in the full message. So when we're when we're not doing that, when we're just listening actively and we're inquiring and summarizing and reflecting back to them, we're not thinking about our response. We're just taking it in. So then after they're finished speaking, that's when we can think about it, even say, give me a moment, or, take a few seconds before you actually respond. So that's one example. I feel like that's probably very common. People think they have to be ready to answer right away. And sometimes that results in a pat answer, right? It's not really a thoughtful answer. So we want to come back with something thoughtful that reflects
mm,
our interest in what they've said. So that would
mm,
be one. Observing our body language. This is something we can do, but we can also observe other people's body language and try to make inferences, because it's very challenging, because often the body language doesn't match, the message. And so we can infer a number of different intentions, and none of which are really what the person intends to show, but they're not paying attention, let's say, to their body language, so they're giving mixed messages. So by observing others, we can start to reflect, oh, am I doing that, or is that something I do on a regular basis? So observing other conversations is helpful. um,
mm,
and then just the idea of behavior change, picking a behavior that you want to change and substituting alternatives. If you write those down on a sticky note or something on two sides of a paper: here's what I want to replace this behavior with these others instead. If you start to internalize this by seeing it on a regular basis, it's a reminder that you want to practice, and it becomes, uh, after a while, and I'm talking weeks, 3, 4 weeks before something starts to become a habit, uh,
mm,
then we can, kind of fall back on that new alternative instead of the bad habit that we were replacing. So that's something we can do. I really believe in those visuals, whether you put it on a sticky note or you put it on your screensaver, or someplace you're going to see this reminder
Mhm.
on a regular basis to just kind of reinforce that message to yourself.
Just to remind yourself to practice that skill, just like, remember to practice that today, and then
Yeah,
until you've integrated that one and then move to another skill and go
yeah,
from. Yeah,
yeah.
nice, nice. Yeah, I love that. Some of the best leaders I've ever worked with, even like being led by, uh, and were some of the most successful people I've actually met. And in the way they listened to my perspectives, even when I was quite young and my opinion was probably very low quality, they still took the time to go, yeah, okay, and even if they were pretending, it inferred to me that they respected my view, and it really mattered a lot to me, and it made me feel closer to them. Like it made me really like, oh, this person actually respects my opinion, and uh, they clearly they're not just like brushing past it. They're clearly way more successful than me, but they're still willing to go, okay, yeah, and then they're like, all right, yeah, and they think it through at the very least,
Mhm,
and it just infers so much. I don't know. It just I just as a human, I felt better about myself as a kid. I was
mhm,
early 20s having these successful people, these authorities or that were leaders
mhm,
do that. It just yeah, I remember the impact it had on me was so strong. I did feel just immediately felt more of a sense of if they're willing to listen to me, even though they're that successful, I'd be willing. I felt more loyal to them. Just
mhm,
it's just like an incredible incredible difference. It makes such a difference versus even of recently, I've had a leader who has incredibly bad listening skills, and it's almost as if my inference is like he's too smart to listen, and he's too quick. He thinks too fast, and it really comes
mhm,
across, and it just makes me not want to even really be around that kind of person. I
mhm,
no, especially to be led by that kind of person. I was just like, no,
mhm.
no way. And so I think the impact of this is so significant, that I think it's worth thinking through, what we're doing, how we're making other people feel through the way we listen, and how we've felt in the past through the way people have listened to us. So, yeah.
I definitely agree with that building of connection that you express where you feel closer to the person just by that validation.
Mm,
When they're taking in what you said and reflecting on it momentarily and nodding, it's just validating. You feel seen, you feel heard, you
mhm,
feel that the person is respecting your thoughts, and they don't have to agree, but they're giving you that space, and they're
mhm,
taking space to take it in. So it is about space, and it's about making space for someone and not talking over them or dismissing their what they say. It's about respect. Really, it comes down to respect, but showing it. And we sometimes we do respect, and we sit silently. We think, oh, I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to just silently listen to what they say. But we may even have a stoic face where we
mm,
don't react. And it's absolutely necessary to have some sort of facial expression, because otherwise the speaker's distracted wondering, hmm, are they listening, or are they thinking about tonight's ball game, or are they thinking about what
yeah,
they're going to do over the weekend. There's no sign of anything on that
yeah,
face. So it's really important to show some sort of facial expression. So
mhm,
yeah, making that connection, even if it's just like after they talk, it's an acknowledgement that yeah, I heard what you said. And when we start asking questions, it's even more indicative that they took in what we said, and they're
mhm,
seeking clarification. They're going in looking for understanding. And that's really what empathy is all about. Going in with the intention to understand and
Mhm.
echo the sentiment behind it. Doesn't mean we have to feel the same thing, but we have to be able to restate it from the other person's perspective.
Yeah, that's I think that's a great way to end the podcast. Thanks for sharing so much of your gold today and your knowledge from over the years. And
You're welcome. Thank you.
you have a great rest of your day and week. And I look forward to catching up with you in the next conversation.
All right. Thank you, Luke.